Hi, and welcome to the Inspired Podcast, Leading the Way in Education. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you insightful discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and entrepreneurship. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I mentor a community of change-making men and women and encourage them to get out of their box and step into their true calling to make the biggest impact in the world. I believe that increasing conflict around the globe today is a sign of the need for systemic change and a call for authentic feminine power and passion to make that happen. Today's episode highlights a recent trend that has been blowing up on social media. TikTok is lit up with debate over the trad wives lifestyle, and influencer trad wives are gaining momentum. They're selling this lifestyle based on it being a relaxing, beautiful tribute to motherhood and beneficial for the husbands and children. But as we know about social media and motherhood, for that matter, if it seems too perfect to be true, it's a guarantee that it probably is. Despite what you see from them online, the wealthy homes, enticing food, beautiful sleeping babies, and the gorgeous outfits. So just to break it down, the Trad Wives, if you haven't heard of it, Trad Wives movement is a cultural and social trend where women choose to embrace traditional gender roles, often focusing now on homemaking, child rearing, and supporting their husbands as the primary breadwinners. This lifestyle is inspired by values and practices from earlier decades, particularly the 1950s, and emphasizes a return to traditional family structures. Proponents view it as a form of empowerment and personal choice, while critics argue that it may reinforce outdated gender norms and limit women's independence and opportunities. Some recent examples that you may or may not have heard of, Ruby Frank, a former housewife, vlogger, and momfluencer. She was charged actually in 2023 with 6 counts of felony child abuse and ultimately pled guilty to 4 counts of second-degree aggravated child abuse and was sentenced to up to 30 years in prison. If you want a deep dive on that story, I recommend the podcast called The Rise and Fall of Ruby Frank. We'll link to it in the episode notes. But, things are not always what they seem, I suppose is a fair statement. Other influencers in the Trad Wives lifestyle are Nara Smith. She's married to Lucky Smith, who's a fashion model and a member of the Mormon Church. Nara gave birth to their firstborn when she was only 18 years old. And she loves to post herself glamorously performing in the kitchen, even making homemade cornflakes from scratch. By the way, when she's just a couple of weeks postpartum, and homemade bubble gum for a family member, just because her family member wanted some bubble gum. So she just goes to her pantry, finds all the ingredients just to make a little bubble gum. Calling all the moms out there with toddlers, though. Toddlers and infants. Anybody who's out there that had been juggling toddlers and infants in the home is not making bubble gum. So it's truly not believable. I completely call BS. Here's another one. Hannah Nealman, also known as Ballerina Farms on Instagram. She's also a Mormon and a mother of 8 living on a rural farm in Utah. Hannah gave up her career as a Juilliard-trained ballerina. She was dancing around the world professionally, but she traded it all in for the simple life when she married her husband. At least this is what she says. But as simple as she wants to make her life seem, there are many signs of significant privilege. So don't let her videos fool you. She is a wealthy businesswoman, despite what she wants to make it look like. So in her videos, if you do watch them, she's on TikTok, Instagram, you might spot her $30,000 oven in the background of her videos that happens to be on her ranch that's valued at more than $3 million in rural Utah. Her father-in-law is David Nealman, founder of JetBlue and CEO of Breeze Airways, with a reported net worth of $400 million. Relatable? I don't know. Not really. Here's another one. Estee Williams, another trad wife influencer, dresses like she just walked off of a 1950s fashion catalog and writes posts about things like, for example, quote, how to attract a masculine man. And of course, let them find you because you can't be the pursuer. And of course, she mentions as long as you're the 3 Fs, that's feminine, fit, and friendly. She also promotes to women for not going to college and just staying home instead. She was recently a guest on Piers Morgan's show, you can actually find on YouTube, entitled, quote, Men Tend to Be Better People, unquote. Totally gross. The common denominator that all of these women seem to share are 2 things. 1, both carefully produced, unrealistic social content, and 2, religion. I have to admit that doing the research for this episode was a bit triggering for me. I had to take more breaks to write this one compared to some of the others. Today, I'd like to share just a portion of my story in what I'm calling a cautionary tale into the trad wives lifestyle. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a very religious family. My parents were products of the Jesus movement of the 1970s in the United States, and I was their firstborn child. The religious influence in my life as far back as I can remember was strong. My parents were part of a Pentecostal evangelical church, so I witnessed a lot of singing, dancing, speaking in tongues, and adults and even small children falling what they would call slain in the spirit. And so that is when, and maybe you've seen it on TV, when people pass out on the floor as a reaction to the presence of God being so overwhelming and powerful. And this lifestyle was all I knew. It really wasn't until I left for college that I realized that my upbringing was somewhat unusual. And by then, the patriarchal messages of the church ran extremely deep in my subconscious. Sometimes my parents would volunteer to teach various lessons to small Bible study groups. Their favorite group seemed to be the new marrieds class. So these young, impressionable couples, many being new to the church, would seek out my parents' guidance on how to ensure a happy, healthy marriage. And often these classes would be in our home. Most of the time, I would make myself scarce, but on rare occasions, I would listen in. One of their favorite lessons to teach was on submission, specifically the calling to women to be submissive to their husbands. Also, side note, this was always a little bit confusing to me because my mom was never really the submissive type. So these lessons looked a little bit staged to me, but she was really brilliant at playing the part. She would sit next to him, snuggle up, let him do the talking, and sit unusually close while the participants in the group leaned in to just better understand their point of view about church teachings. And despite my misgivings and my inner conflict when it came to this topic and my own role as a wife, the message I received in the end was loud and clear. Men are really simple creatures. Keeping them happy is the wife's responsibility. Which is really simple, they would tell me. It really just involves a few things. Really great food when he's hungry, sex when he wants it, and when the kids come along, just a little bit of peace and quiet. After all, we should all be so grateful for his hard work. He takes care of us. It's not a big deal. I mean, what could be easier? This is what they would tell me. Yeah, right. These messages played in my subconscious as to what was, quote, right, but why was my natural self rebelling against it? Soon after college, I got married, I started my career, went to graduate school, got pregnant with my first child, more or less in that order. And I'll never forget a moment when I was 7 months pregnant. I was a teacher at the time in the classroom, and I was due to give birth in August. I had just wrapped up the school year and I was looking forward to finishing my last trimester during the summer break, but I brought up the topic of going back to work. The conversation was met with an emphatic no from my husband. He would say, "You're a mom now. Mothers don't belong at work." So I needed to be at home, and this strange sensation rose up in me. It was like something like a mix of disappointment and also a little bit of shame. Like something in me believed that he was right, and yet I desperately wished that he wasn't. That evening, I remember sitting in my idling car, holding my belly, tears streaming down my face, wondering what I had done and if or how I could actually get free of this. Caring for a newborn as a single mom was absolutely not something I signed up for, but the alternative was to give up who I was. When I made my decision to acquiesce to the title of traditional wife, I realized that immediately the power balance shifted in my home. And obviously that marriage wasn't going to last. After all, it really just was a part that I was playing for someone else. And when I realized that the rest of my life is a very long time to not be me, I had to leave. And I realized that every woman's story is different. But if you're living in a home where religion makes the rules, be careful. You may be asked to let go of your individualism, independence, finances, and ultimately your power. And that is a really high price to pay. And although women should have the right to choose, sometimes it isn't clearly a personal choice. Instead, it's an expectation that others have for you or your church community has for you. And that isn't the same thing. This might sound controversial, but truly, I compare it to sex work. It's like sex work in that it can look like a lucrative path, but it's really important for women to understand the risks. And if there are two paths that go back thousands and thousands of years, it's those two. So let's bring the world forward a bit. I keep coming back to the idea that I was playing a part, not unlike my mom was too in those classes in our living room. Today, when I watch trad wives influencers online, I can see the same in them. Nara Smith making homemade throat lozenges just 10 days postpartum, and Estee Williams all dressed in her 50s costumes, educating women about how to prepare your appearance for your husband so you're ready for him when he comes home. This isn't real. It's not real life. Watching women I love, former trad wives like me, divorce, become single with small children, and then proceed to scrimp and scrape to try to make it financially, often relying on family, friends, and government support, it truly has been one of the biggest heartbreaks of my adult life. If you're a young woman listening to this, and perhaps weighing the pros and cons of a trad wife lifestyle, please consider my story as a cautionary tale. And please, never, ever, ever give up your power. While it may appeal to those seeking a structured, family-focused life, this lifestyle will also stifle personal growth and fulfillment by prioritizing traditional roles over your personal, individual ambitions. Today, women have unprecedented opportunities to shape their own futures. Embracing a more balanced approach offers greater lifetime satisfaction and empowerment. And after all, we are only here on this earth once. Let's support each other by making it count. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's continue to support each other on our path toward empowerment and really personal success, whatever that looks like for you. Please tune in next week for another new episode. Thank you you so much again for joining. Take care.